Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Community Voices. We are joined by Gardner, who's going to be talking a bit about digital wallets. So, just a bit of housekeeping. Anybody who's present and is wanting to ask any questions while Gardner is presenting, feel free to put those into the chat, put them in all caps so that we can keep track of those questions. And of course, there'll be opportunity for questions later in the presentation as well. But with that, go ahead, Gardner. Welcome to the space, and maybe if you could give us a brief introduction about yourself before kicking off.
Yeah, totally. Hey, everybody. I'm Gardner. Let me just get this presentation pulled up here. Going to be talking about the future of identity and community. I'll start with my identity. I have been with VDAO, I guess since like February, at an event. I really believe in showing up IRL to events, as you can kind of see from these images here. On the left, there is my family and I in France, actually. And I'm sporting the VDAO shirt because I actually got that shirt at ECC at the event at ECC, one of the workshops, and the airline had lost our luggage. So that was the shirt that I basically wore throughout some time in Europe. So sporting that VDAO brand all around, which is awesome. I hosted a workshop a couple weekends ago in Austin at the Network State Society camp, which was awesome, all about VDAO, and have hosted a group here in the Bay Area. I'm based in the Bay Area, and I'm also active, of course, in the Discord. You can find me at GLU, and I'm in the process of creating some water catchments around my property here, which is pretty fun and pretty cool. You can find me on Twitter or X at Gardner, also same for Farcaster. Some brands that I'm associated with throughout my life. I started in kind of the entertainment industry, MTV and NBC, then kind of recognized that with the internet first world, you could actually create your own entertainment destination location. So started one of the first short form video distribution and creation platforms. Think of like TikTok before TikTok. Got a bunch of traction there with a bunch of big brand names and celebrities. That was a wild ride, and then kind of got more and more interested throughout my life. I've really been connected to the natural world, and was on the board of Keep America Beautiful for a while, and also part of an organization that plants native trees in areas that have been affected by natural disasters. I recently helped launch Cube3, which is a real-time fraud prevention platform for blockchain. And I'm also the co-founder of Unicorn.eth, which will actually look at some of our products in this presentation because it comes with a wallet, but we are a membership platform for Web3. I hope that gives a good summary of kind of who I am. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be talking about the intersection of internet first, URL, and IRL. And I think that we all care about this intersection because we're all here. And I think that is really what VDAO is doing well, is combining these two worlds, communities offline and online. And I'm really passionate about doing that and kind of scaling the betterment of humanity through science online and in the real world. Values of IRL resilient communities, I think, are a lot of what we see in the Web3 world. So interoperability, decentralization, transparency, self-sovereignty, economic empowerment, inclusivity, and community governance. And I think that is directly in line with the same values of Web3. And I think we're all pretty familiar with all this. And I think that it's really important that we kind of also define like what is Web3, because we've all been through these phases of Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. I'm sure everybody's familiar with kind of like read, write, own. And I don't necessarily, I think, with this crowd need to go into this level of detail, but like obviously it's just the first wave of the internet was really quite decentralized, and anybody could create a read page, then you can write to it with the advent of like, the Facebook of the world. And then own is kind of where we are now. But like we could get a little more specific here and define Web3 even further, because we're going to be talking about kind of Web3 wallets primarily. So blockchain, crypto, Web3, these are pretty much interchangeable in different ways. And there's different ways we could look at different wallets that exist these days. Closed wallets, semi-closed wallets. I'm not going to really go into the details of these things, but obviously there are different use cases for these things out there. And the basic differences are they are permissioned or not permissioned. And so we're going to be really talking about kind of more on the crypto wallet side because of the permissionless nature of things. And I think we're all kind of familiar with how wallets like Apple or your actual bank account work and things like that. But I think the crypto wallets are kind of what is the most interesting and innovative. And so we have to kind of take a step back and like, why is this interesting and innovative? And obviously we need to get into the ethos of, whoa, we jumped ahead there, excuse me. And I'm not going to go through all this either. I'm just putting it on screen. If people want to take a look at this, I think these are kind of like really good examples of open source, free ownership, privacy, permissionless, trustless, democratization, and kind of how payments work in the crypto ecosystem or an open source ecosystem or a Web3 ecosystem. So just wanted to kind of like level set there in terms of like what we're all talking about here. And the purpose of all this is Metcalfe's law. And the systematic value of compatibility communicating components grows as the square of the number increases. So essentially that means that your network is as valuable as the users squared. And that means that there are connected ecosystems that have shared values or protocols. And that's actually what grows a community. And so each of these nodes have to be connected by some sort of value system. And that value system could be digital protocols. And that value system could also be like innate desire to do something and see something. And so for all of us, it's, like future us, like what is the planet look like and what do societies look like? And how are we regenerating the environmental elements of that? And so we're all, in the VDAO world, very much connected and value aligned. And these protocols allow us to have a certain level of sovereignty in terms of how we interact with each other. And wallets are kind of like the best example of how you can enter these ecosystems. There is a book called Bowling Alone. I don't know if people are familiar with this, but it's a social scientist, Robert Putnam, who was noticing that the participation in clubs was decreasing over the past 50 plus years. And this book came out like in the 90s, but it's still continuing to be the case. And so, the key is that participation on a local level, whether that is localized value systems on the web, or that is like actually in your community, is the best way to determine the health of an ecosystem. So that's the same thing as essentially Metcalfe's law. But for those of us like in the Web3 ecosystem, open source is another way to look at this. And that means building in public, right? That means making things, even if you mess things up, right? So this is a silly parallel meme for this concept. And even if you are messing things up, it's good to be building in public, and that's kind of like what we're doing here. And there's also a documentary about this called Join or Die, that like the individual is useful, but the community is really what is required for things to move along. So there's a Netflix documentary, Join or Die, that is actually about that book, Bowling Alone, which I highly recommend to recognize the health of an ecosystem, and how it's so important to have shared identity and values around these things. Okay, so let's get back to wallets, right? So what can they can provide? They can provide community, reputation, economics. All of these things again go back to this concept of Metcalfe's law and like creating an ecosystem where people can gauge the value of the system. Um, that enables discourse, that enables some level of access, that could even enable voting. Ben was talking previously before we started about the ability for like local governments to not only put budgets on the blockchain or something like that, so everything is transparent, but also perhaps having voting, move to this immutable system that also has privacy associated with it in terms of ZK proofs and things like that. But all this eventually comes back down to identity. So like we're dealing with kind of a balance of the community versus the individual, and all of these things have to be tied together in some capacity. Um, which again gets us back to Metcalfe's law. Like you have to have the identity in a digital ecosystem in order to be connected to others on a shared protocol level. We know that there is an inflection point that we are at based on historical references. The internet is kind of where we are, or the use of crypto is where we are now in relation to in the 2000s, the use of the internet. So the ability for people to recognize the value of this technology is like just getting started. And I think we're all kind of fairly familiar with that. This is kind of some stats around where wallets could be and the amount of people that are coming into the ecosystem. So people that own crypto, again, going back to that chart previously, let's say it's around 5% of the world's population. The countries that are issuing and piloting CBDCs, all of this, of course, requires wallets to contain whatever value or identity is in those. And wallets by 2030, there's some estimates they're going to be, perhaps even embedded in hardware devices. And we'll look at kind of some examples of like what that might look like in the future. This is, the problem though that we're starting to face here is that like if this upswing is happening, great, but like the UX is really bad. The concepts that people have to learn and deal with of like seed phrases and things like that, like we are not going to get over these hurdles. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with Bankless, and this is their tagline. And I borrowed this slide from one of my co-founders, Griff Green, and there's a few others in here from a talk that he gave at ECC. But it's like crypto's risky for a lot of the reasons that I just mentioned in terms of like people understanding seed phrases or clicking on the wrong link, and it's not for everyone. But like, why? Right? Like, I don't think that that's. I understand like what they're saying and their premise, but like for the rest of the world, if we believe in these principles that I outlined previously, well, like why isn't this for everyone? And there's great security, right? It's like nuclear grade encryption, but in 2 clicks it just can create catastrophe. Imagine having the keys to some powerful system, and in 2 clicks you are losing. What Ben Roy here says is the equivalent of an average salary for someone. Like this is not how it should exist, and this is OGs that are getting fished, or that are getting having problems with their wallet. So, and this is I could have 1,000 different tweets here that are similar here, and it's like being tired. Imagine if you were tired and you used your bank card and your entire wallet, your entire bank got drained. Like this isn't how we should exist, and this isn't the way that wallets should exist. And so when people are like, "Well, yeah, losing money is a rite of passage in crypto," like again, like that is ridiculous. Like, why? Right? So like the answer is like we're the problem. Like our industry is the problem. Like we've set this problem up for us, and we're like, "Yay, freedom! Like let's do all these cool things. Let's use decentralized Web3 infrastructure to create non-custodial wallets for self-sovereign direct payments without intermediaries." And like then we're like, oh, damn you regulators, damn you Gary Gensler, like damn you SEC. It's like we've completely done this to ourselves. But you know, we go back to this concept of self-sovereignty, and like people should own their own keys and you should give them that. Absolutely. But we should maybe start thinking about how we approach this through kind of some different mechanisms. So what we've been talking about mainly around kind of the scams and stuff is really around EOAs or externally owned wallets. And I think that people are, you know, pretty familiar with all this stuff. Um, but I'll go into kind of some of the kind of key differences of the different types of wallets that exist out there, and why these things are useful in some ways and not in others. So if we look at kind of just like general safety of EOAs, as I've outlined in terms of the 2 clicks, like you have total freedom, and you have the total freedom to drain your own wallet when you click on a malicious link or sign a malicious contract. Onboarding for EOAs is extremely difficult for anybody that wants to understand this. They have to have a big why. They have to learn about seed phrases and all this stuff. Um, and recovery is like non-existent, certainly of funds that are lost. I mean, again, this is the permissionless, this is the trustless side of it, is that like if you have your funds stolen, there's really no way that you can recover these things, and there's no way that you can stop them from happening other than obviously disconnecting and using kind of like a revoke.cash sort of thing. Um, dApps are great. You can engage with a bunch of different dApps in a permissionless way, and privacy is pretty good in terms of pseudonymity. Um, on the custodial wallet side of things, I mean, we saw some of the different types up at the top of the presentation that I didn't really get into, but like these are, you know, some of the things that we're familiar with of like decentralized systems out there, like the Coinbases of the world. And the safety side is a little bit better. And the onboarding side is getting really good. And the recovery side can be good. The dApps connection is not great. And privacy is definitely not great, depending on how you look at it, right? Like you have to go through KYC and all those sorts of things. And so it's definitely, you know, the types of issues that come up in a custodial wallet of, you know, subpoenas that get sent and things like that. They'll definitely know, obviously, who people are. If they've been doing wrong things, they should be held accountable. Um, and that's kind of a benefit of that too, depending on kind of how you're looking at the responsibility and the social fabric. But um, the thing that like I think is most important to talk about is kind of what has recently emerged in terms of smart contract wallets. And you may have seen Vitalik talking a lot about some of this technology that has come out in the past year plus. And I think this is really where things need to go. And the safety of smart contracts wallets is better. The onboarding is better. And we'll look at some examples. Recovery, you can have social recovery and things like that. You can connect with dApps, and you still have this privacy side of things. And this is all around what's called ERC 4337. This is the standard. Again, this is going back to Metcalfe's law again is like if we all start to use a similar standard and a similar protocol, and then there's kind of like an easier onboarding process, flexible signing rules, flexible gas policies. There's like a paymaster where like you can have sponsored transactions. So you can have someone actually create a smart contract wallet without having seed phrases, without needing to purchase any sort of crypto token in order to pay for a gas fee, depending on what chain you're on. And also built-in safety features like being able to have a set limit for how much withdrawal can occur within a certain period of time. Like this can all be like programmed in. So it's kind of like programming what your bank would do if there was some sort of fraud detection or something along those lines, and only allowing a certain amount to be withdrawn within a period of time and things like that. So there's all these different features that can get built in terms of smart contract wallet. And the result is just like better UX, right? Like, so again, if we're trying to scale the ability for people to, excuse me, have access to all of the infrastructure that's being built, let's give them a better way to get onboarded. But again, we have to come back to why. This is the why again. So wallets have to be easy, trustworthy, so individuals and groups can innovate and thrive. That is really the goal here. How they can do this is through safe account wallet tech, one-click onboarding, which we'll talk and we'll see a little bit about what that looks like through a real example. No self-custody hurdles. And this is, important for, you can custody your own assets and you should custody your own assets, but you shouldn't have to go through an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of researching how to do all of these things. It's just like it's not going to be possible for the general public to do that. It's the similar, issue of, should people know what TCP/IP is in order to send an email? Like, no, like you shouldn't make people have to understand public and private keys. They should at some point go through some sort of graduated security where they start to get slowly onboarded. And in the beginning, they have a small amount of value in their wallet. And then as they broaden their ecosystem and their interaction, their engagements with the ecosystem, then they start to learn more, and then by at some point they have a hardware wallet, right? But like getting people to immediately get to the hardware wallet stage from 0 to 1 is going to be really difficult if we want to scale this kind of concept, this kind of world. Easy, configurable, brandable smart wallet that UX the people can trust. When I say kind of brandable, we'll look at some examples of what that might look like, and some things that are happening out there that are pretty neat. So basically, like, to break down all of this, a solution that I really believe should exist in terms of wallets and wallet safety and wallet usage is people should need to know networks in terms of switching between the L1s and the L2s. There should be network abstraction. There's a lot going on right now and a lot of conversation going around how we do this, specifically in the Ethereum ecosystem. No 0x addresses. We'll look at what that looks like and how you can actually do this today, not as kind of EIP or something like that. It's like ENS allows for a lot of this right now in the Ethereum ecosystem. Seed phrases can be abstracted in smart contracts. No scams. And the reason there's no scams is because some of the things that I'm describing around these sorts of wallets are really truly fish proof, where you can start to actually permission things. Now, to the purist, permissioning sounds scary, but I think that there's a balance that we have to strike in terms of what people are actually trying to do. And so permissioning in certain ways, I think, is really healthy for the ecosystem. It's not to say that there needs to be blockers for people to interact in other ways. but I'll kind of get to some more specifics instead of speaking those vague terms in a little bit here. Graduated security, I talked a little bit about that in terms of the ability for people to get onboarded with a very simple system. And then as the value of whatever they're holding grows, to really understand the value of actually getting something that has public-private key pairing that they can then understand, but not in day one, right? Customizable permissions, we talked a little bit about that in terms of the ability to limit withdrawal limits and things like that. Contract address filtering warnings. I had mentioned at the top of this call, Cube3 is a company that I helped get through the early phases from kind of the content explaining side of things of like translating some of the hacks that were going on and what was happening and things like that, and making it accessible for people to understand. That's all well and good. But if you just have like a risk score for every contract address or every interaction that you're going to make on chain, you actually can start to understand as an end user, very simply, if you should be making this transaction, you may have, a warning or a pop-up. It's similar to like a spam filter in an email or something like that. John says, my mom will never and should never even try, but would be great for her to get some Web3 benefits. Yeah, I mean, this is what we're really talking about here is that like your mom shouldn't have to know what Web3 is, right? Like the ecosystem that we're creating should be available for people to access regardless of their technical knowledge or lack thereof. And I'll talk about a personal example coming up here that is very, very in line with that, John, as well. So yeah, there are some things here that we could get into around like what's actually happening out there. So these are kind of some like hardware wallet SIM cards that may be going in Vodafone. This is out of India. And these are the types of things that start to happen in the background, right? Where like, again, it's an identity layer. I don't know in this case how specific the individual is going to be able to control their identity or like what information is being stored and things like this. But like, I actually do think this is a step in the right direction where you're like abstracting these things, like even kind of like on a hardware level. Some other things that I've seen like IRL at ECC, Citizen Wallet did a really cool thing where I'm actually still have this. It's the same band. And it was like a tap to pay. There's like actually a battery in here. It still works. I actually the other day accidentally like brushed it up against my phone and my phone recognized it. And so there's some like really cool stuff that's happening in terms of like NFC wallet tech and things like that, that is really, again, combining the IRL and the URL and making this super convenient. And I think they're doing some really cool stuff. And definitely worth checking out. And there's some kind of stats on like their test at the Regen Village at ECC. So kind of how this looks, and I'm going to walk through kind of like a use case that is actually launching today, which is pretty fun. And that's why I think that this is so relevant to have this conversation today, because at Unicorn.eth, we have created something for ETH Denver. And it's going live today to Spork Whales as kind of like an early thank you for them. And essentially, it's the ability for them to create an account with ECC, or sorry, with Ethereum Denver. And they get a smart contract wallet that comes with their account. And all they have to do is single sign on, one click to authenticate, whether it's Google or whether it's an email address that they own that is, Proton or something along those lines. But then they can select a username, which is also a smart contract wallet address. So like we're seeing these things happen already, and we're actually like building these things. And we're launching these things. And so it's not just like pie in the sky to be like, all of this can be accessible. If ETH Denver wanted specifically for anybody to come to the event, and it's a really inclusive event. I don't know if everybody here has been to the event, but I would really I would really encourage you to check it out because of all the events like in the world, it is, I think, like has like some really cool vibes. And John, as I said, a personal example, I'm actually going to bring my mom this year. And she's going to see kind of like what I've been talking about in Web3. Like, that's another thing, is that we have to go IRL to like get the vibes of people. And, the meetups with VDAO is like, this is what it's all about. It's like getting an understanding of like who people are and like why it matters to be a part of the ecosystem. And unless people are actually like having conversations, seeing what the level of discourse is, um, my mom doesn't even know what Discord is. She's never gonna like come into a VDAO chat room and be like, "Oh, this is cool." But like now, she can actually get a smart contract wallet and an ETH Denver account just with her email address, and she can get a username. And whether or not she uses that subdomain that it's powered by ENS, that is kind of a totally different conversation of like how deep somebody wants to go. Again, it says graduated security, it's like graduated awareness. So people can get a sense of kind of like what is happening under the hood if they want. But just like she doesn't care, about DNS names, she's not going to care about ENS names, right? And most people don't. But now we're actually able to connect the DNS and ENS worlds, and it's the same thing as connecting Web 2 and Web 3. Like, this is all happening, and it's really happening on a financialization level right now with like the, banking industry creating their own chains and kind of figuring out all of these things. Like, it's all kind of moving in this direction. So this is a sneak peek. If anybody is going to go to ETH Denver, and you have in the past, if you're a Spork DAO member, you also may know how difficult it was to just like get Spork. Of course, you have to go through having a wallet, um, and and all that, but then you would have to get Matic, now Pol, then you'd have to get Spork, then you'd have to use the staking contract for Spork, then you would be able to apply. And so we've kind of abstracted all of these things. So like this is all in practice right now. This is all happening. And anyone can do these things at this point. So it's pretty exciting. And then along the security side of things or the safety side of things, there's only approved partners within this application. There's only approved tokens. So people can't like scan a QR code and get scammed, because they have permissioned these things to only interact with approved contracts. Now, of course, you can scan and use your own, EOA wallet. But this is, again, making sure that new people entering the ecosystem have a sense of kind of like what's happening and why. There's also community analytics that you can get from all this stuff. And there's all these things happening around AI agents and crypto out there as well. And I know I've kind of like now gone into the future a little bit beyond kind of like what's happening right now. But like these things are only going to increase in speed, velocity, and it's going to be pretty interesting to watch how AI agents are interacting with each other. We've been talking about humans interacting with all of this, but I think what we really need to be thinking about is how AI is going to have wallets, right? And how the speed at which all of this is going to increase so rapidly. Um, so I think that's it for me. I think there's ways, obviously, we could talk about how we can kind of like help, people understand and slow down these things. But this is me. That's my talk on wallets. Now let's get into any sort of discussion. Okay, John said, agree, ETH Denver is super inclusive. Have really enjoyed the past 2 years. Yeah, for sure. So cool. And John, you'll be able to see that system in action. So I would love to get any feedback from you on the onboarding process for actually having an ETH Denver account.
Yeah, I just checked my email to see if there's anything from Spork DAO. Haven't gotten it yet, but look forward to that.
Next week.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Today is just Spork Whales, just as like a hat tip. Thank you for that. They wanted to ensure that Spork Whales that have been around for, 7+ years got access to the account creation flow first.
I'm only 2 years. So yeah, thanks. This is super interesting. And even, I'm like fairly familiar with these things after 10 years, but it's good reminder and really important to be thinking about how we can safely bring new people into the ecosystem. As you said, like giving them the benefits of Web3 without even, you don't even have to say Web3, you don't have to say crypto. Let's just, make better experiences for people. So, and I've seen Griff mention Unicorn Wallet might have been on one of the talks that we had with him going back earlier this year. But so how is it similar or different from like Patch or Privy or some of these other ones? Is it a similar idea? Or do you have different?
Yeah, there's similarities and differences. So essentially, like what we're doing is a wallet is part of kind of a bigger concept around accounts. So we believe that like anybody should be able to spin up their own membership account. And that could be an organization, that can be an individual. Like thinking about like literally my daughter the other day was like, I want to start a babysitting club. And I was like, that's so awesome. Like, you should be able to actually start your own little babysitting ecosystem, right? Where like the parents are able to pay through, the system because, she doesn't have an account with, a bank yet. But like, there should be like interesting ways that we can do things that are kind of beyond just having a wallet. Like a wallet is a feature of something broader, something larger. So we're kind of going towards more of a localized ecosystem route where anybody can create a membership program and kind of bolt on the different dApps and applications that they might want that are already built. So, like for instance, if you wanted to generate your smart contract wallets through Privy instead of like Third Web or something like that, that infrastructure could potentially be possible. But there are some differences in terms of our relationships with the ecosystem already. So like, and I don't want necessarily to have this talk just be about the Unicorn.eth or Unicorn Wallet, but we do have kind of some early pre-seed from like ENS. So like our relationship with ENS is really strong. So we are able to do this like DNS to ENS routing with wildcards and things like that. So people can use a top level domain. So for instance, you saw some of those slides previously of like the username of like it'd be like john.ethenver.com. You may not be able to get that one because John Poller, the founder of ETH Denver, may have already scooped that one this week. But like that would actually be a destination URL. And it would also be kind of the concept of like a Venmo address, but for only the ETH Denver ecosystem. So you could pass tokens or like whatever back and forth at the event through your own kind of branded wallet. And so there's a little bit of magic going on in the back end there, which is kind of different than some of the others out there.
Yeah,
Joshua, you got a question? Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Say that'll be really useful for ETH Denver and other events where I'd rather not have to involve my normal everyday wallets, which are on my laptop anyway. Just to be able to, have something on my phone that's safe and it's just for ETH Denver. I can try things out, use it, and that'll be a big plus. So thanks.
Yeah, exactly. And what you can actually do is you can authenticate if you're a Spork DAO member with a wallet that, let's say your EOA holds your Bufficorn Bill Brigade, right? Like you may have an NFT.
Right.
And then it'll also be reflected in your wallet and you can like drop down and change the wallet to your ETH Denver wallet or back to your EOA. But your EOA is just reflecting. It's not actually a signer, although we probably will incorporate some external signers. But my point being that like if you set, let's say you had a hardware wallet, you authenticated with your hardware wallet at home, and then you came to the event, it would still reflect that you are actually the owner of those things. Because for those that don't know, as an example, like if you have an NFT, it gets you access to a lounge, right? Like the Bufficorn Lounge. And so you wouldn't have to actually like have a hot wallet or your, a hardware wallet in order to authenticate and show somebody at the door, like this picture. Like, so, I think there's just so many cool, flexible things that we can do these days that we like really even couldn't do like last year. Like, it's all moving just like so fast. It's really cool.
That's great. Thanks.
Joshua.
Hey, thanks for this. I consider myself champion of the normies. I am not a programmer, developer, and I actually don't like crypto, but I'm a huge fan of blockchain. So my interest is in deploying blockchain for business operations. And so true to what you're saying here, everything needs to be invisible. Most of our audience is 40s, 50s, 60s, and they are wanting to jump on the bandwagon. They want to be a part of moving forward. They want to be a part of social change and revolution. I am not holding my breath really that these things are going to be particularly UX friendly for the next, well, not not fast enough for me, that's for sure. I'm curious kind of about protocols and ecosystems, blockchain ecosystems. It seems like one of the issues that I've observed so far, and I've been adjacent for a while, just not super deep, but it seems like one of the issues is that a lot of this complexity and convoluted issues with trying to deal with different chains and different ecosystems and different wallets is kind of stems from this core challenge, I think, in Ethereum and Bitcoin, where you end up with layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, just to get to the point of being able to even conduct transactions due to gas fees and all these things. What are the odds, do you think, that they're, well, I'll say I've been following Algorand for a long time. They don't even really need smart contracts. All their assets exist on layer 1. Transaction fees are barely even calculable. It's really what I'm looking at as far as deploying eventually here. Are we going to be stuck in this ecosystem where you have to have this incredible level of complexity because of those issues with Ethereum's gas fees and different communities, developer communities that are splintered off in all these different directions and have a hard time integrating? Is there a path to really actually simplifying this, or do we just need to keep building on this kind of thing that appears to be very fragmented and duct taped system that people have been working on developing on for years now? It seems to get more and more complex and more challenging, and it seems like the problem we have may be somewhere at the root there. And is there a way to actually streamline all this?
Yeah, so there is a lot of work going on, and there's a few things that you mentioned, and we talked mainly about wallet abstraction or account abstraction, and there's also chain abstraction that's going on, right? And I think that when we start to see what kind of shakes out around chain abstraction, it may be that you identify the chain as if it was an email address, right? So like similar to what we have, like if let's say it was an ENS address, and it was like Bridget dot ENS at OP or something like that. You would have to know the name of the chain. You wouldn't necessarily have to. And I actually don't know if I really agree with that being the solution, because again, like then people have to know like what the chain name is. That is one of the proposals that is out there right now. I actually don't know kind of what the status of how far along that is. There's also some other concepts around kind of like ensuring that you have bridging abstracted and things like that. And so, yeah, when you make one introduction to the ecosystem, it kind of like disrupts a few others. So we still have some ways to go in terms of creating chain abstraction. But again, this stuff is moving so fast that I think we're going to see some real improvements within the next year, just like we've seen a lot of improvements like with account abstraction. Like I said, like I wouldn't have been able to show you this like last year. And that's pretty impressive. And again, once that like AI gets involved a little bit deeper in all of these things in terms of finding solutions and finding like novel ways to interact, like it's equally scary as much as it is exciting. But I guess it really depends on kind of like what problem you're trying to solve, right? Because like each of these tools serve different functions, right? Like, and that's true for of any tool. I saw a funny meme the other day that was like, a fool with the tool is still a fool, and it had like somebody holding a hammer backwards, right? So like the head of the hammer was back here, and then like just the stick of the hammer was here. It's just like it depends on what we want to do, and I think that's more the question of like what are we trying to do here as an ecosystem, and how are we combining the URL and the IRL, and like that's first principles what I keep coming back to, and why I like am super excited about VDAO is because like this is kind of like what we need to elevate and create a society where people are participating. And if people can't participate in the URL ecosystem, it's going to be really hard for them to participate in the IRL world. And we've seen that, of course, like in different countries in terms of just like being unbanked, right? Like if you can't get a loan, like you're not able to do things that are going to lift you out of poverty. Like not to say that loans are the way to lift yourself out of poverty, but they can be. I'm just saying that like there are different ways that people need to interact with just like basic digital infrastructure. And if we're moving towards a Web3 world, whether we call it Web3 or whether we just call it the internet or whether we call it Web5, like people do need to be able to have the tools to do this. So I would say in short, I think there's hope. It's just a matter of kind of like what we do next in terms of making this accessible for people. And I do need to make sure we're aware of time here. I do have to go in a few minutes. Yeah, what's up, Ben?
Yeah, a couple questions. One being, how can something like this type of wallet, which can allow for community curation, for developing an ecosystem within the community, be applied for like network states? And for instance, in VDAO's case, right, where there's a central DAO, or which is decentralized, but there's the DAO, and then you have the V hubs that would make up the components of a DAO. How would a wallet like this be beneficial within that ecosystem in helping to align individuals and onboard folks who are more in the URL side to help them take or be more in participation with governance decisions and things like that?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to like again the requirements of network effects, and like if you can put people all in the same room together, they can be, there's a better likelihood of them being participatory, right? Discord, I think, is a good example of that. But I remember even in the very early days of the VDAO calls, it was like I think I even brought up this issue of like a lot of the people that Joshua is probably referring to and interacting with like don't know what Discord is. Like if you guys only have a Discord, like you're going to limit the accessibility for people. Like should you create a Facebook group? Like yada yada yada. So I think that if you're able to own, I mean, this goes back to the reducing of the intermediaries, and this goes back to the self-sovereignty. Like if you're able to create your own space and your own platform that like you guys actually are in control of, and that it's also easy to onboard people with just an email address, like anybody can go to that location, that web address, or they can go to their own web address, right? Like I was showing you before, the like username of like ben.vdao.io could be like where you go, and like you don't have to remember like, oh, what was that VDAO URL? Is it a VDAO.com? No, it's not VDAO.com, like so and then there's of course teaching people just about bookmarks, where it's like, here, this is your user page and you can interact with the entire community here. And I think that because these things are possible now, you can then start to put in different ways of interacting within that. So like you can have, alerts that are, that are saying, hey, go vote on this proposal or things like that. And people don't have to, again, have to know what a seed phrase is in order to authenticate their wallet to do these things, where like it is all on chain, because that is a Web3 ecosystem that you're creating that they're in. But like Joshua was saying, like you don't even know that like you're in a Web3 ecosystem. You just know that you have an account, right? And then you go and vote on something. And instead of it going through, a Google form or something, which you could totally do too, like you can have a D form, right? And that D form is decentralized and you have control over that D form, and it's not predicated on some other intermediary platform. And again, this isn't necessarily just about like not having intermediaries for the sake of intermediaries, but it's trying to create efficiencies and trying to keep things within your own ecosystem that I think is like the most important part about kind of like the value of Web3. I mean, the bankless thing is like the most extreme example of like nobody should have bank accounts. Everybody should control their own assets. Like we've seen that that's really dangerous. Like people are not ready for that yet. The majority of people are not ready for that. So yeah, like it's all definitely becoming more possible. It's just a matter of like making sure that the tools are foundationally possible to fulfill on the actions and the engagements that you want from and for your community. So we can definitely talk about these things perhaps offline in a different way of like what specifically features you guys are looking for and how to kind of either use other dApps to plug into the ecosystem that you want to have for those engagements, or building those, in more of kind of like a white glove way if they're like outside of the standard engagement mechanisms that exist right now.
Amazing. So yeah, just being conscious of time. I don't know if you had time for one more question, if anybody else had another question. Otherwise, happy to go ahead and wrap things up. Is there any other questions, Josh or Lasan or John? All right. Looks like we're good. Yeah, so just want to say thank you for taking the time, Gardner, for sharing your insights and sharing about Unicorn.eth and your wisdom and knowledge about digital wallets. It's a very interesting topic. It's something that, obviously is seeing leaps and bounds in the last like 12 months even, in terms of like, abstract account abstraction and things. So very interesting topic. And yeah, thank you so much, Gardner.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks.
everybody.
Spork DAO announcement, and happy to give feedback on that or anything. Really excited about.
Yeah, please do. You have my email. You know where to find me, obviously in the Discord or on Twitter. Please reach out when you get that. It'll probably come on Tuesday. Sneak peek. And then for the general public, if nobody on this call other than John is a current Spork DAO member, again, for those that are not in Web3 and not in the Denver ecosystem, you have no idea what that means. That's fine. You won't have to. That's the coolest part about what they've built here. It's like the first time that like any newbie that has no concept of what Web3 is can actually join and get a Web3 wallet for this event. And that's going to happen on the 13th of November. So on the 13th of November, everybody can kind of go through that process without any concept of what Web3 is and create an account. And it'll explain to you what's happening. But like literally you will get airdropped a token that then will get staked for you, and then you will become part of the Spork DAO organization, all with visibility into what's happening, and you just literally clicking buttons. So it's pretty exciting.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Gardner.
So much. Appreciate
Bye.
it.